Hey heroes, welcome to another cosmic episode of History of the Marvel Universe. This channel is sponsored in part by Patreon supporters. If you would like to vote in monthly polls that help decide what topics get covered on the channel, then you can sign up for $1 per month over at patreon.com/MaryMarvelite. The link is in the description below, along with other places you can find me. Captain Mar-Vell is a name that's been used by a number of individuals across the multiverse. Of course, in the Marvel Universe proper, the moniker originally comes from the alien warrior Captain Mar-Vell. He was a member of the race known as the Kree, but after coming to Earth, his helmeted alien uniform and peculiar name caused people to believe that he was a new superhero called Captain Mar-Vell. Funnily enough, this basically ended up actually becoming the case, as Captain Mar-Vell became a hero both on Earth and in space as he allied himself with the Avengers and others against the likes of Thanos the Mad Titan and other threats, both cosmic and terrestrial. But eventually Mar-Vell met his end. During a battle with the explosive human criminal known as Nitro, a canister of deadly nerve gas was ruptured. In order to save thousands of innocent lives, Mar-Vell held the tank shut with his own two hands. While he succeeded in sealing the leak before anyone else was hurt, he later learned that the gas was carcinogenic to his alien biology. He continued to act as a hero for several years, but eventually succumbed to his cancer. He passed away peacefully, surrounded by friends and allies who had come to pay their respects to the hero they knew as Captain Mar-Vell. Of course, Mar-Vell would leave behind a considerable legacy. For example, when his ally Carol Danvers was endowed with similar abilities after a battle between Mar-Vell and his rival Yon-Rogg, she became a superhero herself, under the identity Ms. Marvel, before eventually adopting the Captain Mar-Vell alias herself. There was also a time during the Kree-Skrull War when Mar-Vell grew close with the Skrull princess Annihilation. While their union was brief, it did result in the birth of a hybrid Kree-Skrull child, Dork-Vell. He was subsequently raised on Earth under the name Teddy Altman, eventually becoming the young Avenger Hulkling. We may very well do a video focusing more on him in the future, but for now, we're going to look at the other son of Mar-Vell. And so with all that preamble out of the way, this week's story really begins before Mar-Vell's death, when the Titanian supercomputer Isaac was reprogrammed by Thanos. For those unfamiliar, Isaac was built by Thanos' father Mentor to help him run the Eternal Colony on the Saturnian moon Titan. For a quick breakdown on that, you can check out my video on Thanos' origins, or my Eternals video for a more comprehensive look at the history of that race and their colonies. Anyway, after Thanos was defeated by Mar-Vell and his allies, Isaac began plotting to conquer Titan in his name. As part of this, he used Eternal technology to genetically engineer a group of lieutenants to command his forces, growing them quickly with the Titanian life baths. Among them was a woman named Elysius, the Mistress of Paradise, one of Isaac's earliest creations. Initially, she found herself attracted to Eros, otherwise known as Star Fox, Thanos' more heroic brother, who was held captive alongside Mentor and the other Eternals of Titan. But when Mar-Vell and Drax the Destroyer arrived on Titan to oppose Isaac, Elysius was sent to confront them with her trained beasts. However, the noble griffins she employed sensed the hero's calmness and serenity and responded in kind. Taking this as proof of Mar-Vell's virtue, a smitten Elysius sided with he and Drax against Isaac. After that conflict was settled and both Titan and Isaac were restored to normal, she stayed with the Kree hero and the two became lovers. It was after that when Mar-Vell was diagnosed with cancer and Elysius stayed with him until he passed away. Mentor and Isaac, meanwhile, examined his condition and recorded data on his genetic code, but were unable to find a cure. When his time was drawing short, Mar-Vell asked his trusted friend Eros to take care of Elysius after he was gone. While Eros did fulfill this request and was there for her when she really needed him, he also had his own life and his own adventures. Elysius understood this and held no ill will against him, but was ultimately left feeling empty and alone. Stricken with grief, Elysius used the data recorded by Isaac to replicate Mar-Vell's DNA. Using that, she artificially impregnated herself with her deceased lover's child, and Eros played the role of the father. The baby boy, Genis, had a normal birth, but given the enemies Mar-Vell had left behind, Mentor feared for the child's safety. At his insistence, the baby was artificially aged to adolescence within only a few weeks of his birth, and implanted with false memories to hide his true parentage. Elysius raised her son on an isolated planet called Paraxis, and Genis believed that Eros was his father. After reaching the physical equivalent of 17 years old, he traveled to the planet Calculex, where he spent 5 years emulating Eros's hedonistic lifestyle. There he befriended Glib Arcanian, the owner of the Grab and Grub Bar and Grill, as well as 2 of his employees. Zoofree Grasswind, or Zoog, a member of the horse-like Chimelian race, and Steck'ee, a blue-skinned alien who could change sex at will but generally preferred to remain in female form. Then one day, Elysius asked the Silver Surfer to retrieve her son back to Paraxis. Upon seeing Genis again, she revealed the truth about his parentage and upbringing. She also gave him a pair of Nega-Bands, modeled after the ones worn by Mar-Vell, but designed to activate the latent energy powers he inherited. Genis was initially hesitant to accept this, but then the Kree accuser, Ronan, arrived, intent on using the bands in their ongoing conflict with the Shi'ar. Now, I should probably mention here that Mar-Vell's original Nega-Bands enhanced his power and were used to trade places with the human, Rick Jones, during the time Mar-Vell was trapped in the negative zone. However, after his death, those bands were stolen and used to create a devastating weapon of terrible power, the Nega-Bomb. That was all part of a plot to jumpstart Kree evolution orchestrated by the deposed Kree leader, the Supreme Intelligence, who telepathically influenced Shi'ar leaders into creating the bomb. Despite the efforts of the Avengers, the Nega-Bomb detonated, devastating the Kree Empire, including their home planet Hala. And so, back to the story at hand, Genis-Vell donned his own Nega-Bands to keep them out of Ronan's hands, defeating him with help from the Silver Surfer. Declaring that he would be a worthy successor to Captain Mar-Vell, Genis started calling himself Legacy. Elysius returned to Titan and invited her son to stay with her there, but he felt the need to go out into the universe and forge his own path. He started by going back to Calculex, expecting to find trouble due to its high levels of interstellar traffic. There he unexpectedly received respect from beings whose lives had been saved by Captain Mar-Vell. And so not long after that, Genis succumbed to temptation and began using his powers for selfish purposes. After learning that he was taking petty revenge on people who had wronged him in the past, the Silver Surfer confronted a Legacy, defeating him in battle and teaching him that power such as theirs must be used responsibly. Humbled, Genis saw the error of his ways and promised to do better. In a subsequent adventure alongside the Silver Surfer, Legacy encountered Nitro, the man indirectly responsible for his father's death. As mentioned earlier, Nitro was the villain whose attempted theft of a canister of powerful nerve gas is what led to Mar-Vell being exposed to the carcinogenic substance that ultimately caused his death. Genis didn't know that at the time, but Nitro recognized aspects of his costume and deduced a connection between him and Mar-Vell. It wasn't long afterwards that Genis pieced together the truth by reviewing his father's logs. Acting against the wishes of both his mother and Eros, Legacy swore to avenge his father by killing Nitro. He tracked the villain to the ruins of the Kree homeworld Hala and nearly took his revenge. However, when the fight spilled into a military museum, Genis saw a monument displaying a quote from his father: "Defeat your enemy, do not become your enemy." And so rather than kill him, Legacy apprehended Nitro, bringing him back to Titan where he could be safely locked away. Genis-Vell subsequently tried to balance his heroic exploits with his more lascivious desires, at one point bringing a reluctant Silver Surfer to the pleasure planet Seloquonia. Those he encountered would often refer to him as Captain Mar-Vell, either mistaking him for his father or assuming he carried the same title. At one point he encountered the Kree General Bel-Dan, who asked for his help. We've actually mentioned him on the channel before, since he was the Kree representative who oversaw the conflict between the Shi'ar and the X-Men during the Dark Phoenix saga. He also clashed with the Skrull representative Raxor in a conflict that was meant to be fought in lieu of a full-scale war. Of course, for the full details on how that turned out, you can see my video on the Kree-Skrull War linked in the description. But back to the story at hand again. With the Empire devastated, Bel-Dan had become a general in the Kree Consolidated Peace Battalion, who wished to restore the Kree military. He told Genis-Vell that there was a faction of rebels who had planted a smaller but still very dangerous Nega-Bomb on a Shi'ar space station, Link 313, and entrusted him with the task of disarming it. However, the whole thing was a setup. Bel-Dan and his so-called Peace Battalion were actually conspiring with a rogue Shi'ar faction, the Crystal Claws, to destroy the station and frame Genis. Blaming himself, Genis returned to Calculex and reunited with his old friends, Glib, Zoog, and Steck'ee, who helped him learn that it was a frame job. He then tracked members of the Crystal Claws to Earth, where his father's old friend, Rick Jones, convinced him to appear on his daytime talk show. Genis agreed, expecting the opportunity to clear his name, but instead was embarrassed on live television, leading to some enmity between the two. That broadcast was also how Monica Rambeau, the human hero who had been using the name Captain Mar-Vell, first learned of Genis-Vell. Genis also clashed with the Shi'ar mutant hybrid Adam X, otherwise known as Extreme. As his code name implies, this is a man whose fashion choices could only have come from the early to mid 1990s. In any event, Adam had been brainwashed into attacking Genis by the leader of the Crystal Claws, Devon Shikari, better known as Eric the Red. After Genis undid this brainwashing with a trip to the negative zone, he and Adam joined forces to defeat Shikari and foil his plans. Genis subsequently battled the leader of the Kree Consolidated Peace Battalion, Zoog, the cyborg son of Yon-Rogg. As a refresher, Yon-Rogg was once Mar-Vell's commanding officer, but the two became bitter enemies until Rogg met his end while trying to use a device called the Psych Magnetron to amass power. Mar-Vell defeated him, but the machine was damaged in the battle, and when the Psych Magnetron exploded, Yon-Rogg was caught in the blast. It was also that same explosion which awakened within Carol Danvers the powers that she would employ as Ms. Mar-Vell and later Captain Mar-Vell. Of course, Yon-Rogg's son, Zoog, blamed his father's death on Mar-Vell and attempted to take revenge by killing Genis-Vell. Zay even turned his weapons on innocent civilians to provoke his enemy. But in the end, Genis overpowered the vengeful cyborg and even put his negabands on him to transport Zoog into the negative zone. An overwhelmed Rogg panicked and quickly returned, but the two-way trip shorted out the technology in his suit and he was soon arrested. With his name cleared, Genis decided to accept the inevitable and take his father's mantle as Captain Mar-Vell. He also spent an intimate night with Steck'ee, seemingly taking their relationship beyond being just friends. However, he awkwardly bungled things by acting like he was doing her a favor by sleeping with her. He later joined forces with Monica Rambeau against the villainous controller and attempted to concede the name Captain Mar-Vell to her, but she decided to let him keep it, instead changing her code name to Photon. However, Genis apparently continued his self-indulgent lifestyle as mentor, and the rest of Titan's ruling council later elected to take back his Nega-Bands. The bands were given back to Elysius, who brought them to Mar-Vell's grave. But there, she was killed, and both the Nega-Bands and Mar-Vell's remains were stolen. Drax the Destroyer was framed for Elysius's murder, and so Genis-Vell tracked him down, intent on taking revenge. However, Drax was saved by his ally Gamora, and things got more complicated when Genis saw the reanimated corpse of his father wearing his Nega-Bands. The whole situation was part of a scheme by Siphon, a warlord from the Negative Zone and the one who actually murdered Elysius. His ultimate goal was to drain the power of both the Nega-Bands and Adam Warlock's Soul Gem to obtain godlike power. While Siphon succeeded in abducting Warlock, Genis reclaimed the Nega-Bands and used them to bring Drax, Gamora, and Pip the Troll to the Negative Zone. In the end, the day was saved, Siphon was defeated, and Genis-Vell kept the Nega-Bands once again. After that, there was a complicated conflict known as the Destiny War, in which Rick Jones used an enigmatic power called the Destiny Force to summon a team of Avengers from different points in time. One of these time-displaced Avengers was a future version of Genis-Vell. Much like his father, this version of Genis possessed a cosmic awareness that enhanced his normal senses to near omniscience. And also, much like his father, he had been molecularly bonded to the Rick Jones of his timeline, and could switch places with him by striking his Nega-Bands together. Okay, there's kind of a lot going on here, so I'm just going to step back a little bit and add some more context. Before this, the last time that Rick used the Destiny Force was during a pivotal moment in the Kree-Skrull War. In that instance, he was able to temporarily immobilize every combatant on both sides of the war and bring the fighting to an end. However, doing so pushed his human body past its limits and would have been fatal, if not for the fact that Mar-Vell allowed the Supreme Intelligence to bond his life force to Rick's. For a while, they used a set of Nega-Bands to switch back and forth, much like they did when Mar-Vell was trapped in the Negative Zone, but eventually they were separated once again into two independent entities. And so the future Genis-Vell that Rick summoned during the Destiny War had evidently done something similar, and could switch places with an older Rick Jones from his timeline. But then, at the end of the Destiny War, Rick was fatally injured. Just like Mar-Vell did before, the future Genis-Vell combined his life force with the younger Rick to save him. And now here's where things really start to get complicated. Even though it was a time-displaced future version of Genis that Rick bonded with, when he later struck the Nega-Bands together, it was the present-day Genis-Vell, the one we've been talking about during this whole video, who appeared. Furthermore, while he initially manifested as his usual self, he quickly and involuntarily gained the appearance and cosmic awareness of his older counterpart. While Rick and Genis made the best of the situation and continued attempting to honor the legacy of Captain Mar-Vell, their relationship was at times antagonistic, with Rick sometimes pranking the younger hero. They soon discovered that one difference between their connection and the one Rick had with Mar-Vell was that when Rick and Genis switched places using the Nega-Bands, they did so through the Microverse rather than the Negative Zone. Genis also had difficulty controlling his cosmic awareness at first, often misinterpreting his visions, but received training from the telepathic martial artist Moondragon to help parse and understand what he was seeing. As a side note, Moondragon is a character who seems to come up fairly regularly on the channel, so I really ought to do a full video focusing on her someday. As Captain Mar-Vell, Genis-Vell went on a number of adventures while bonded with Rick Jones, not all of which we have time to talk about today. So if you want to read those for yourself, you can start with the Captain Mar-Vell series that ran from 2000 to 2002 and is available in its entirety on Marvel Unlimited. In one such adventure, Genis was transported to the Microverse, where he and Drax the Destroyer encountered the Microns, a team of heroes previously known as the Micronauts. In another, he traveled to a parallel dimension and met that world's version of his father. It seems that that version of Mar-Vell was on a similar path to the one we knew, as he had also contracted cancer during a battle with Nitro, and so this encounter allowed Genis to come to terms with some of his unresolved father issues. He also subsequently battled a returned Zoog and his blue-skinned sister Una. For context, when Mar-Vell and Yon-Rogg first came to Earth all those years ago, the medic on their vessel was also named Una. That Una, whose surname is still unknown, was close with Mar-Vell, much to Yon-Rogg's frustration and jealousy. However, she was fatally wounded in a battle between the Kree and another alien race, the Akon, leading Mar-Vell and Yon-Rogg to blame each other for her death. And so it seems likely that Yon-Rogg named his daughter after the medic Una. However, she would have to have been born long before her namesake's death, since she is known to have had a brief dalliance with Ronan before he became an accuser, which would have been before Yon-Rogg and Mar-Vell even came to Earth. It certainly adds a new level of weirdness to think that while Yon-Rogg was pining for medic Una, he already had an adult daughter with the same name. Anyway, from Una-Rogg, we also learn something disturbing about Kree culture. According to her, most Kree women naturally possess the ability to twist the desires of men and dominate them. Fearing this ability, the male Kree instigated a policy in which young women were systematically identified and psychically mutilated to neuter the pleasure centers of their brains. Not only did this remove their seductive capabilities, but also robbed them of the ability to feel any kind of sexual gratification. Furthermore, Una-Rogg was born with the rare ability to drain life energy from males, something that apparently occurs in roughly 0.001% of Kree women. Yon-Rogg, however, wished to spare his daughter the painful process of psychic mutilation and used bribes and forgeries to make the male Kree authorities believe it had already been done. And so she retained her succubus-like powers into adulthood. While Genis-Vell battled with Zoog, Rick's wife, Marlo Chandler Jones, cut Una's leg with a shard of glass. The spilled blood drew the attention of the Bloodhounds, beings created by the Kree to hunt down and retrieve untreated females. Una-Rogg was brought back to the planet Hala, which by this point was under the control of the Supreme Intelligence and occupied by a race of Kree called the Rule. Okay, time for another quick explanation. I mentioned earlier that the Nega-Bomb employed during the Kree-Skrull War was part of a plot by the Supreme Intelligence to jumpstart Kree evolution via Nega radiation. Well, shortly after the Destiny War, the Supreme Intelligence obtained the Forever Crystal, a time-bending artifact at the heart of that conflict. Using the crystal, the Supreme Intelligence artificially induced the effects of thousands of years of evolution on his subjects to create the Rule, Kree with the ability to individually adapt to any environment. And the Rule evidently had no need to subject their own women to this treatment, since the supposedly undesirable traits were eliminated at the genetic level. In other words, and this is very messed up, while male Rule are perfectly capable of deriving pleasure from physical intimacy, females were not. The Rule did successfully remove Una-Rogg's ability to drain the life force from others, but Genis-Vell thankfully rescued her before she was forced forcefully transformed into one of them and robbed of her ability to enjoy sexual experiences. She then accompanied Genis on an adventure in the Negative Zone where they encountered Burstar, the son of Blastar. At the end of the day, Unarag was given a small ship, exiled from Hala, and has not been heard from since. Genis subsequently went on a time-traveling adventure in which he encountered a version of Miguel O'Hara, the Spider-Man of the year 2099, as well as a version of the Maestro, an older, more evil and conniving incarnation of the Hulk. After that, he returned to Calculex to reunite with Glib and Zoog, but learned that Steck'ee was missing and presumed dead. In truth, she had been abducted by the Magus. There's a little bit of a long story behind him, but the short version is that he's basically the evil side of Adam Warlock personified. In the end, Genis was able to rescue Steck'ee and escape, but sometime later he fell victim to schemes concocted by cosmic entities Entropy and Epiphany. By this point, Captain Mar-Vell believed that he was fully in tune with his cosmic awareness. However, Entropy secretly supercharged his senses, allowing Genis to not only see crises unfolding across the universe, but also the unintended consequences of both his actions and his inaction. This knowledge and the realization that he could see everything but not fix everything drove Genis to madness. He studied under the human vigilante Frank Castle, the Punisher, in an effort to learn discipline before joining a Kree military battalion with the goal of bringing order to an increasingly chaotic universe. He became romantically involved with a woman named Saria, but was ordered to kill her after it was discovered that she was a Shi'ar spy. Instead, Genis shot his commanding officer and 2 other Kree before executing himself for treason. He subsequently resurrected as a powerful energy being and was confronted by Entropy. Entropy was considered the son of Eternity, the cosmic being who both represents and is comprised of the entirety of the universe. And Entropy wished to fulfill his purpose by destroying his own father. Together with Genis, he actually succeeded and brought about an end to the universe, resulting in peaceful nothingness. All that existed was Entropy, Epiphany, Genis-Vell, and Rick Jones. In that nothingness, Entropy was unsure of what to do next, but Rick suggested that he find a new purpose by attempting to create rather than destroy. With Genis's help, Entropy caused a new Big Bang and recreated the entire universe exactly as it was. More or less, but we'll talk about that in a moment. Ironically, Eternity was reborn as well because Entropy then became Eternity. He himself described this as a cycle. As Eternity, he is his own beginning and his own end. Or perhaps his own entropy. Now, one might wonder if this means that this Eternity is technically a different being from the previous one. However, this is largely irrelevant due to the fact that the Eternity which comprises the universe we know is but one of many who collectively make up a larger multiversal Eternity, one who represents all of existence. In other words, every individual Eternity is simply part of the larger, true Eternity. But back to the story at hand. As I said, the universe was recreated largely as it was. However, because Genis-Vell was involved in the process, the timeline of the resurrected reality was subtly altered by his subconscious desires. Most notably, in this new version of reality, Genis was a more heroic and capable version of himself, one who was able to prevent his mother's murder. And because this version of Genis-Vell was so successful in his endeavors, Elysius decided to repeat the process and create a second child, his sister, Phyla-Vell. Now, her life would be another story entirely, so perhaps we'll dive into that another day. In any event, when the old Genis-Vell reinserted himself into this new reality, he replaced the more heroic version of himself that he'd unknowingly created. And so even though the timeline was reset back to right before Genis was driven insane, allowing him to save the people he couldn't before, he soon found that other lives were lost instead, causing him to descend into madness all over again. He ultimately decided that his powers made him a god, and began using his cosmic awareness to identify and eliminate anyone he deemed a threat to universal order. He eventually somewhat recovered thanks to the intervention of his mother and sister, at least enough to feign sanity, but for the details on that and what happened afterwards, you can check out the Captain Mar-Vell series that ran from 2002 to 2004. Maybe we'll cover some of those events on the channel in the future. Perhaps if we talk about Phyla-Vell, we can dive into some of them. So if that's something you'd like to hear about, let me know in the comments below. In the meantime, thank you guys for watching this video, and if you enjoyed it, be sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share it on your favorite social media. As always, the issues referenced in this video are listed in the description below if you would like to read them for yourself, as well as links to other places you can find me, including my Patreon page, where for only $1 a month you can get your name in these special thanks here. And you can vote in monthly polls that help decide what topics get covered on the channel. So until next time, true believers, Excelsior!